about the first Jewish pilgrim, Joseph, the son of Levi, also known as Louis de Torres, and why I know what many of you had for Thanksgiving dinner just a few short days ago. Raise your hands if any of you had turkey. Well, our story begins with this punim that many of you probably recognize. This is none other than Christopher Columbus. And thank you for raising your virtual hand so I was able to see it. Everyone knows a little bit of the story, but there is a Jewish backstory to the story of Christopher Columbus. And that starts out with some of the financiers who financed his first voyage. It also with the astrolabe, which was invented by Abraham Luzzatto. But there is also the translator who was on his ship. And we find this with a poem. And the poem was one that some of you probably remembered from your high school, The History of the United States, by Winifred Sackville Stoner, who wrote, and you can even join me virtually, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and in his crew there was a Jew, and his name was Louis de Torres. This is the 4 lines of poetry that is recited every Friday night at the Louis de Torres Synagogue in Freeport, Bahamas. Now, in order to understand what's going on with this Jew and the story of him, we need to have a little bit of a backstory. The first Jew, the first pilgrim, Louis de Torres. So, it was the year 1492. It was the summer, particularly August the 3rd, that this famous voyage with the 3 ships of Christopher Columbus went forward. However, there was a backstory, because just before this, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand had conquered the remaining part of the Iberian Peninsula, pushed out the Muslims, and celebrated with the unification of the Iberian Peninsula, and decided with that religious fervor, we want everyone to be Christian, everyone to be Catholic. And that's what Catholic means, universal. And the Jews were given 3 choices. You could convert to Catholicism, you could leave the country, or you could be killed. Clearly, 3 difficult choices. They were given a few months to make the decision, and the last day was August the 3rd, in the Hebrew calendar known by Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, the Jewish Friday the 13th. And this was the day that the Jews had to make their decision. For many of the Jews, they wanted to continue to practice Judaism, so they left. They went to Portugal, to Lisbon and some other places, and from there to Amsterdam, to Greece, to Turkey, to the land of Israel. Other Jews decided to become conversos, or hidden Jews. Sometimes we heard it with the prerogative term marranos, which is the Castilian Spanish word for swine. And many of them subsumed an alternate identity. So Joseph, the son of Levi, became Louis de Torres, a good Spanish name. But he was afraid of being found out and the Inquisition, so he and many other Jews secretly, or conversos, came on the ship with Columbus and left in the nick of time. Now, why was he chosen? Because he was an interpreter. He knew Hebrew and Arabic. He knew Chaldean, ancient Babylonian. He knew Spanish and Portuguese and French and Italian, maybe even a smattering of Sanskrit, because they weren't sure who they were going to find. So Louis de Torres was really the first person to become a pilgrim, someone coming over, fleeing from religious persecution to come to the new land. Now, what's the connection with Thanksgiving? So they come to this new country and they see these funny birds with sort of a red thing here and a funny little beak and a big tail in the back. And Louis de Torres has never seen this. No one else has ever seen this unique American fowl. He, being fluent in Hebrew because he's Jewish, looks and says, perhaps this looks like a parrot to me. The Hebrew word is tuki, and such, the word turkey has been the name of this unique American fowl, according to tradition. And we see this if you go to Freeport, Bahamas, which was not far from the very first place on October 12th in 1492 that Columbus, quote unquote, discovered. We know he didn't discover it because there were indigenous people, but he arrived there on what he called San Salvador, appreciate. And this is the only, you're seeing a picture, and it says Freeport, Bahamas, and the Louis de Torres Synagogue, which was built in 1974, COVID, at which time it was down, and I haven't been able to find out whether the Jews have come back. But that is the story of Louis de Torres and the nomenclature of Tuki, also known as Turkey. So that's our prequel Thanksgiving story as we begin our talk. And if you think about the Caribbean, what are some of the associations that come to mind? Well, for some of you, if we're going right to left, because we have that Hebrew influence, we think about beautiful beaches and endless sunshine and snorkeling. For people in the center, you see a pirate. And what is the favorite letter of a pirate? You might think, "Arr," but we know that a pirate loves the sea. Okay. And or beautiful waterfalls. But there is much more to the Caribbean to that, because it's really at the central place of the world. Or as I like to say, as you've spoken to any realtor, location, location, location. So here you have the Caribbean. You'll see to the north, of course, is where we are in North America. To the south is South America. Directly to the east, you'll see is Africa. To the northeast, you will see is Europe. And it's really in the heart of everything which connects the different parts of the Western Hemisphere. And it's because of this location that everyone came here. And they came here searching for one thing, and that was spices. Because when you think about the world, we have so many wonderful things, and we have delicious food, and we put them in the fridge. But if you don't have a fridge, how are you going to keep your foods? And so there was a hunt to go all over the world for delicious spices. Here is one from the Spice Islands, as parts of the Caribbean were known. But before that, the Spice Islands were in Indonesia or in India. And things like salt, very, very important. because with salt you could preserve things. In fact, the Latin root of the word salary comes from salt, and we know even the expression, a person, are they worth their salt? And in the time of the Roman Empire, soldiers were paid in salt. Salt was very important for preservation, but there was one which was even more valuable. And the most valuable one is the one that I'm holding up in my hand, and that is sugar. Holy sugar. Because sugar is literally the sweetness of life. And there was battles of all these different countries and empires fighting over sugar. The Portuguese, the Danish, the Dutch, the Brits, and the French battled over it. They built massive forts, such as we see here, the Brimstone Fortress, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in St. Kitts, because sugar was so important. So what did they do? The secret of the cultivation of sugar comes from sugarcane. You'll see this is a contemporary sugar mill, and that is found in Barbados. And this comes from the sugarcane fields of St. Kitts. So everyone would come over, they would plant sugarcane. Now, sugarcane is a wonderful crop. It grows, but it is very intensive. You need a lot of labor. And because of this is one of the great tragedies in humanity civilization, where we had the French and the Dutch and the Portuguese and the Spanish and the Brits go over to Africa and kidnap people unwillingly, take them across the Middle Passage, which horrendous conditions, to bring them as slaves to the New World in order to work against their will to harvest in the sugarcane fields. So this was one of the great tragedies. They originally came to Brazil, again, this tropical climate. And the people who came were people who were in Portugal, who knew the secret of how to make sugar. These were a lot of the Jewish conversos, and they took that knowledge to South America and later to the Caribbean. And when the Inquisition came here, they would flee. When the Dutch then took over Recife in Brazil, they followed and practiced freedom. But when the Portuguese came back in 1654, they left for other Dutch colonies, such as Curacao and St. Martin, and that little island in the Atlantic called Manhattan or New Amsterdam. And so the story of the sugarcane plantations and economy in the New World really comes from the Jews, which means sadly, we were, or tragically and sadly, we were in the business of owning plantations. And from the plantations was great wealth. So let's talk about our first port of call, which is Barbados, which was at one time called the most valuable piece of real estate in the world because of all of the plantations there. A quarter of the plantations were owned by Jews, and they became fabulously wealthy. And they built a gorgeous synagogue. And you'll see something interesting if you go down there, that this is called right in the center of Bridgetown, which is the capital of the Republic of Barbados, that there is the Synagogue Historic District. This was a synagogue built in 1654 called Nidhei Yisrael, literally the remnant or the ends of the world, because this is where the name given to them A similar name, by the way, She'ereth Israel, is the name of the first synagogue in Melbourne, Australia, the first synagogue in San Francisco, the first synagogue in Montreal, because they were at the end and they built these gorgeous synagogues, which you can see today. They have beautiful walls around them, and they are pink and absolutely gorgeous. They were, again, it was built 1654. It was later destroyed by hurricanes, then rebuilt, fell into ruins, and then restored by the Barbados government. And they are absolutely gorgeous because as you go in, you see the Holy Ark. They are made out of beautiful mahogany. You can note on the left, I don't know whether you can see my little cursor as I'm lifting it, hurricane lanterns. In the right, you will see the Sephardic style because you see um, the bema is right in the middle of the synagogue, and the community is around it. And that is one of the um, signature architectural elements of the um, Sephardic communities. Absolutely gorgeous synagogue. They do have regular services. It's affiliated with conservative movement and usually visiting rabbis in the winter. In the summer, it's a lot slower. And everyone is, of course, welcome to go to. As they were doing archaeological excavations of this gorgeous synagogue, they discovered a pool of water, which was the mikveh that was used. And it goes all the way back to 1654. It is still a working mikveh, and it is halakhic. You can see there's 7 steps going in to this pool of pure water, which is used for ritual immersion by women on a monthly basis, by used by choice by men, before holidays, and it's incredible that this was found. Surrounding the synagogue are beautiful graves, and the graves are written in Portuguese and in Hebrew. Because again, these were Portuguese Jews. But when we say Portuguese, they're really Spanish Jews of people that came over. They went first from Spain to Portugal, later to Amsterdam, and many came straight here. And on the graves, you can see this. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. As you can see that there's many issues for these gorgeous stamps because this is the pride of the country. Before we go into St. Martin, I did want to share that, again, they left Spain with very ambivalence. And if you're angry at Spain and the way that you were treated, how would you take that out? Many of the Jews and the conversos became pirates. And they would then board Spanish galleons and wanting to rob and to take out their aggressions and to make some money as these privateers going and being able to not only earn a living, but do some damage against the Spanish royalty. And there were numerous Jewish pirates. And because perhaps there's even a book written called Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, in Louisiana, there is a state historic site, the James Lafitte, a Jewish pirate site, which tells the story of this. So here we are in St. Martin, and a beautiful view. This was an area. On the other side are salt ponds, and we were curious to see what is the legacy and the heritage of the Jewish life there. So if you go there, perhaps the most touristy and interesting, unique site is something called a guava berry emporium. And as you see the sign here on the left, it's the Dutch West Indian cedarwood townhouse. sits on the site where the Jewish synagogue, which was built here in the late 1700s. Sadly, it was abandoned in the first years of the 1800s, but it is a national historic monument. So Jewish life peaked in the 1700s. But why was it abandoned in the 1800s? People still liked sugar. They still had rum, which was a way of trading some of the sugar. But then instead of just the sugar cane, there was the sugar beet. And a lot of the island's economies started collapsing. That and hurricanes and other natural events made things very difficult. But you'll still see the legacy. Wherever we go in the Caribbean, we like to have we call it our Mezuzah hunt. And so there at Diamonds International in St. Martin, if you look in the top right-hand corner, you will see a mezuzah. And then you'll see my beloved wife, Hillary, pointing to a place where a mezuzah was taken off. And you'll see a Chanukiah in the store window. And you'll see diamonds. Why are Jews traditionally into jewelry? And some of the great diamond merchants, in fact, so many of the diamonds that may be mined in Africa go through Amsterdam and Antwerp and Tel Aviv, because Jews have always been at the center of the diamond industry. And it makes sense. Again, we talked about the conversos having to flee for religious freedom, the pilgrimage. And if you have to leave quickly and you're forbidden to take any money, what's a good way of transporting your commercial wealth? Well, you could take a diamond, you could sew it in to your clothes, and it's very portable. It's not like a particular piece of currency, because diamonds aren't just a gal's best friend. They are international currency because they have value wherever you go. So, Jewish residual culture, if you'll see here, a sign for organic herbs in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a Jewish star, because these were symbols that were there right from the beginning of Western civilization. And when you go to other places and even on churches, you'll see this is the Anglican Cathedral in Antigua. Beneath the cross, you will see the Jewish star. Now, we understand that theologically from Christian tradition, because the Christians will say, well, of course, everything comes from Judaism in their tradition. We know that because according to Christian tradition, and Jesus was a Jewish boy with two Jewish parents, Joseph and Miriam, when Jesus was born, according to Christian tradition, on the 25th of December. And being a Jewish boy, what would happen 8 days later? If you'll count 8 days from the 25th of December, you come up with January 1st, when Jesus would have a bris, as would all traditional Jewish boys. And on a Catholic calendar, even until today, it's called Feast of the Circumcision on January 1st. So we find that Jewish traditions are found in symbols and other things as you go through. And perhaps one of the most curious stories is about Hamilton. Now, I would ask again, how many people have seen Hamilton or been there? Me, I saw it down at the Denver Center for Performing Arts. And there's this incredible story about Hamilton and whether indeed he was Jewish that I want to share with you now.
And squalor, grow up to be a hero and a scholar. The $10 founding father without a father got a lot farther by working a lot harder, by being a lot smarter, by being a self-starter by 14. They placed him in charge of a trading charter.
And every day while slaves were being slaughtered and carted away across the waves, he struggled and kept his guard up. Inside he was longing for something to be a part of. The brother was ready to beg, steal, borrow, or barter.
Then a hurricane came and devastation reigned. Our man saw his future dripping down the drain. Put a pencil to his temple, connected it to his brain, and he wrote his first refrain, a testament to his pain. Well, the word got around, they said this kid is insane, man. Took up a collection just to send him to the mainland. Get your education, don't forget from whence you came, and the world's gonna know your name. What's your name, man?
Alexander Hamilton. My name is Alexander Hamilton. And there's a million things I haven't done. But just you wait, just you wait.
When he was 10, his father split, full of it, debt-ridden. 2 years later, see Alex and his mother bedridden, half dead, sitting in their own sick, the scent thick. And Alex got better, but his mother went quick.
Moved in with a cousin, the cousin committed suicide. Left him with nothing but ruined pride. Something new inside, a voice saying, Alex, you gotta fend for yourself. He started retreating and reading every treatise on the shelf.
There would have been nothing left to do for someone less astute. He would have been dead and destitute without a cent or restitution. Started working, clerking for his late mother's landlord, trading sugar cane and rum and all the things he can't afford. Scamming for every book he can get his hands on. Planning for the future, see him now as he stands on the bow of a ship, headed for a new land. In New York, you can be a new man.
Okay, so according to Lin-Manuel Miranda, how does a bastard orphan son of a whore and a Scotsman, dropped in the middle forgotten spot in the Caribbean, grow up to be a hero and a scholar? It ends the story trading sugar cane and rum. What is the origin of Alexander Hamilton? Let me go to the next slide. Well, for this, we have to go to St. Croix to learn about the mother of Alexander Hamilton, which is Rachel Levine. And as the sign says, she was the mother of Alexander Hamilton.
That'll be current.
You still hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So let's find out a little bit about Rachel Levine. First of all, does she have a Jewish name? Of course,
yeah.
Rachel. Last name Levine, married to Johann Levine on the Isle of St. Croix. She was not Jewish, but Johann Levine, we suspect, was indeed Jewish, because Alexander Hamilton's grandson called Johann Levine a rich Danish Jew. Also, there was no baptismal records found for Johann Levine, which would be something very unusual, unless, of course, you were Jewish. So let's find out a little bit more. So Rachel Levine had, again, a horrible marriage. She was abused. She fled to Nevis, not far away from St. Croix. You'll see as you go to Nevis, part of the country today called St. Kitts and Nevis, and it says birthplace of Alexander Hamilton. There you will see the house in which he was born. It was originally, this was his original house. It was destroyed by a hurricane and restored, and is now a museum. So Rachel Levine came, and she did have relations with a Mr. Hamilton, who was a Scottish merchant who came, who was well-to-do, and she had this child, Alexander Hamilton, out of wedlock. But because she was still married to Johann Levine. Nonetheless, they raised Alexander Hamilton there. Now, if there was a child and had a birth, you would expect some sort of baptismal certificate. Alexander Hamilton had none. He grew up in this community of Nevis, which was a lovely community. A quarter of the community was Jewish, and they were involved in the sugar trade. They owned the plantations, they grew the sugar. And you can see that if you go there, we can see the Jewish cemetery. This was around the year 1670. It's a really teeny place of just a few, like 5,000 people on the entire island, and it tells the story of the population of Charlestown in the 1720s was a quarter Jewish, and you can see this gorgeous cemetery. Here you have my beloved wife there. By these graves, you can see the stones that we put on the graves to remember our loved ones as a physical manifestation of that we were there. And on these graves, you will see Portuguese and Hebrew. The graves are raised up, as is customary in places with which are close to the ocean. You'll see that if you go to New Orleans or many other islands or places along the coast, how they'll raise it up because of the high water table. Now, if you look at some of the graves, you'll see the one on the left, and you'll see the symbol of the Kohanim, of the priests, with the palms out. And over here, where I am with my hand up, you will see the remnants of what we believe was the Jewish synagogue. Now, how does this bring? Actually, let me go back here. So this was Jewish Nevis. Again, a quarter of the community was Jewish. Where did Alexander Hamilton go to school? He went to the Talmud Torah, or the Jewish yeshiva, which was on the island. Now, if you think about places like the Denver Jewish Day School, what percentage of the people there were indeed Jewish? Well, probably 99%. And why would Alexander Hamilton go to a Jewish day school or Talmud Torah? Well, the answer is obvious: because he was Jewish and raised Jewish. He did not ever have a baptismal certificate growing up. Later on, he did convert to Christianity. But why would you have to convert to Christianity if you were born a Christian? And he always had this affinity for the Jewish people. He became the first secretary of the United States Treasury and is found till today on the $10 bill. By the way, how many other secretaries of the U.S. Treasury have been Jewish? We have at least 5 of them, including the last 4, including people like Janet Yellen and Mnuchin and Larry Summers. So this has traditionally been a Jewish experience, because we as Jews have been used to finance and trade. And it started with Alexander Hamilton. He was always, of the founding fathers, perhaps the most liberal and accommodating. Why would he be so wanting to embrace Jews and people of different religions? Well, of course, if you grew up Jewish and you had Jewish family, that would make you presumably more tolerant. And that is the legacy of Alexander Hamilton, giving him this unique relationship upon the founding fathers. He was an attorney, and he advocated for Jewish citizens in court. He gave Jews the greatest opportunities in the economy and advocated for no discrimination against Jews. And he went to Columbia University, and he made his alma mater the most welcoming to Jewish people of any Ivy League school. The first school to ever have a Jewish president was Columbia University. And if you look at the crest of Columbia University and go to the very top of it, you will see the Yud Hey Vav Hey, the Tetragrammaton, having God above all. And then if you look down, you'll see on the right-hand side, it says Uri El, literally, God is my light. You'll see the Hebrew there. And that's why many people, Columbia University has the tradition of being one of the most welcoming to Jewish law students. And of course, we mourn RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a graduate of Columbia University. Her daughter still teaches there. And a shameless bragging right about my son, and my son, Jonah Baskin, graduated Columbia this May and just passed the bar. So I am proud. So that is a Jewish tour. And I want to open up for questions on anything that I did say. And I'm going to stop at this time the screen sharing. Did Caribbean Jews own slaves as well? Absolutely. And this is kind of a real busha, a shame. I guess that the question was, how were the slaves treated? And this is something we don't really talk about. When I did do a previous presentation, Holy Sugar, the Jews, of Suriname, where I volunteered leading the High Holy Day services over a year ago, and a quarter of the Jews did have plantations, they said that the Jewish slaves were treated better. And when people were given a choice whether to be a slave of the Jewish plantation owner or of a Christian one, they preferred the Jewish ones. Now, why? On Sunday, the day of rest, all the slaves had a day off. But if you're on a Jewish plantation, what day off would you have? You would have also Shabbat or Saturday as a day off. And such, you would get 2 days off instead of one. So, and many of the Jews were converted to Judaism. And there's an expression, if you shake a family tree in Surinamese society, Suriname, which is Dutch Guyana, the top of South America, you will find Jewish roots among all the Black people there, because there was some intermarriage. And of course, slave owners having relations with their slaves, that is, again, unconscionable, and it happened. So I don't want to apologize for anything. This was a dark chapter, and it was the source of the incredible wealth that went to build these beautiful synagogues. You'll see these gorgeous plantations. And it's really a soul reckoning that we have to deal with. What are the ramifications? What are reparations? What should be done going forward? And we find the legacy of so many elite institutions all come from on the backs of slaves. So yes, we own slaves. Hopefully we treated them better. And I think this puts us really with an obligation to fight slavery everywhere in the world. So great question. Any other questions?
Yes, Rabbi Baskin.
Yep.
I read the book, The Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, and the author there makes a pretty good argument that Columbus himself was Jewish. What do you think about that?
Great question, and there's been many books written on that. Um, and I guess we could say it certainly is possible that he was Jewish. Um, I guess it's hard to prove. So is it possible? Absolutely. For absolute sure, people on his ships leaving on Tisha B'Av in 1492, there were conversos on the ship. Louis de Torres absolutely was Jewish. The physician on board was Jewish. The Whereas was Christopher Columbus Jewish? I'm not sure. I don't think that there is among the historians unanimity saying that. It's indeed possible. And again, in that book, they say it is very likely, and I think it's a good case. I'm not exactly sure, so I'm not going to say with certainty. However, I am convinced that Alexander Hamilton was born Jewish and grew up Jewish and went to a Talmud Torah. Um, Fact that he did go to a Talmud Torah. Fact that his mother was Rachel Levine. Are we sure that she converted to Judaism? Not sure, but highly likely that that happened. So great question. And maybe as we go forward, we'll find out more about the Jewish origins of Christopher Columbus.
Thank you.
I have a note from Randy. It says, just a note, the first European voyages landed in the Caribbean instead of North America because the prevailing currents pushed southwest rather than due west in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yep. Great point. And again, it's the currents that are everything. And there was that triangle of currents going from Europe to the Caribbean and then going back over, or was it Europe and then to Africa and the Caribbean and then going up? And this was the trade. Again, it was slaves for sugar and rum and back to Europe, and which really fostered incredible wealth for Europe on the backs of African slaves who were kidnapped against their will.
Just thank you so much for the presentation. It was very interesting and entertaining. And it was, it's just all these connections with Jewish heritage is really very fascinating. So thank